Hey everybody, welcome back to Time to Lean, where Laura, Danger, and Crystal Britt, where we both collect up your dirty laundry. You send us in your dirty laundry and we help you clean up your shit. We are so excited today to have Michael Vaughn, aka World Shaker, on TikTok. I'm sure that if you are a parent, you have come across Michael before. Just to give a little bit of an introduction, Michael's a dedicated father, content creator, and advocate for equitable distribution of household labor and care tasks. As a father to two incredible daughters, Eleanor and Adelaide, ages 3 and 1, Michael's made it his mission to not only share his journey through fatherhood, but also to promote a balanced partnership with his partner, Kelly. With a combined following of over 700,000 people on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Is that number current, Michael? I feel like it's higher than
Yep.
that now. Okay.
It's up to 725. Yeah.
Amazing. Michael engages his audience with informative and entertaining content covering topics such as the Fair Play Method by Eve Rodsky, the importance of sharing household responsibilities, and the delightful adventures of the hit cartoon show Bluey. Michael's passion for creating awareness about the need for equity within the home resonates with his ever-growing community of supporters. I think that is the most well-written bio I have ever read for someone who content creates. Like, that's incredible. That is encapsulates you as a person.
It
Thank
was
you
it was
so
I will be
much.
honest, it was co-created with ChatGPT. I had the outline in there. I was like, I need a little help making this sound nicer. And it did a really
That's
nice job
incredible.
helping with a little back and forth.
That's a great use of Chat GPT. That's excellent. That was really good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here with us. We're so excited to have you.
Yeah. Thank you
Long
for
time.
having me. This is really exciting for me too.
No, that's awesome. Like in terms of where people have found you, right? Like they probably have come across your content about Bluey. I love that you've kind of taken that element and have kind of married it with this like cross collaboration of like interweaving, including dads, including male caregiving partners, to be more involved and to understand like a better concept of domestic labor and the mental load. That's incredible. Can you tell us a little bit about like your journey with that and with content creation?
Oh yeah. So we found out we were going to have our first back in 2019, and not to overshare, but when I was growing up, my dad wasn't really around. He was not an active participant, still is not. And it's sort of one of those weird things where sometimes you learn from a really good example, and sometimes your goal is to be the opposite of the example that was set for you.
For
So I
sure.
wanted to learn as much as possible about this kid that was coming, and I read all these books. I took all these classes. I was trying to follow people online who were talking about parenting stuff. And I noticed a couple of things. First, a lot of it's very mom centric, which I think is, that's a whole issue right there. It's a little bit of a thing to unpack, because I know sometimes we talk about like, why don't as many men engage with my content, for example, or like Zach's another creator that comes to mind who like does not see a lot of men engaging with content. Doug's another person. And it's because typically this content is targeted towards women, because the assumption is that it's a woman's job to learn those things. So it was a little disappointing to see men and dads so underrepresented in that field. And I think it's partly because there's not a societal expectation that you be engaged with a
Mhm.
child that's coming in that way. But I learned a lot, and I was really excited about learning a lot about my kid. And one of the best classes that I took was this class called Boot Camp for New Dads. And I strongly recommend it to any new dad. It's fantastic. It is just dads. It is a little thematically heavy, like monster truck football at times, but one of the best parts of that class is they pull in veteran dads who have been dads for like 3 months, and they bring their baby on a day out, and you get to talk to them, you get to interact with their kid, and you get to ask any questions from someone who just went through this experience that you're preparing to go through. And I found that to be really valuable. I enjoyed that. That was the first time that I really had like a spirit of camaraderie with other dads to be, where I was actually connecting with other men who were going through the same thing that I was. And I had signed up to be a veteran dad to bring our first back to the session. And that was scheduled for April 2020. And I never got to do that because everything shut down 6 weeks after Eleanor was born. And so just didn't get that chance to connect with other folks. So it started, I made a TikTok account like everyone else during the early days of the pandemic. I think my first viral video was about me cleaning a coffee thermos. TikTok's so weird. It's like your niche. I was like, oh God, I'm gonna have to talk about cleaning thermoses. That's my entire account now. It's just this.
My
Um,
personality now. I
but
got to lean into it.
that's exactly it. But I think the second one was about Bluey or something like that. And I was like, I'm finally finding my people. But that became a really important outlet for me. I was not going into it with the goal of building like this huge follower account or anything like that, or trying to make money off of social media. It was just, I really missed the connection with other parents. I used to present a lot before the pandemic, and I love doing that too, like in my work life. And I wasn't able to do that as much because of the pandemic. So it was just like the marriage of those two things where I can do something that I love, which is taking complex ideas and trying to translate them to folks who are trying to learn those things, but also connect with other parents who are going through some of the same struggles that we are, who might not know as much and who might find the same things interesting that I found interesting when I was going through that process of learning how am I going to transition into being a parent, because like there's no breaks on that. Like there's no breaks on that. I can put off certain projects. I can't put off a baby coming. It turns out they are very bad about scheduling meetings and following up with the calendar. So but yeah, that was how I got started, and it's really blossomed from there. The success has been really rewarding. It's been cool to see all the people that I get to connect with. Like, never imagined I would be here on your podcast, which is a really cool like, this is a weekly high for me, so I'm really appreciative of being here. But yeah, that's basically how I got to this point.
The feeling is very, very mutual. Because when I tell my kids, like when they're like, what are you doing? What are you podcasting with Laura this week? I'm like, oh, I'm interviewing the Bluey dad. And they're like, I'm so sorry, what? And I'm like, I know. My husband, who is not even on social media, is like, that's pretty legit. I was like, I know. Don't make my head swollen about it. It's fine. And especially too, like during Christmas, I think you had a few, I mean, you've had a lot of videos go viral, but it was especially important for all of the men in my family because they all got a copy of that video sent to them with the gift giving template that you put together, and is incredible. And in my opinion, foolproof, right? Like that's just so immaculately put together. So I know, Laura,
Thank
you
you.
have a video that we wanted to talk about in relation to kind of gift giving and seeing your partner and understanding your partner. This was also a video that went viral on TikTok. That it's a thing. Let's cue it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Michael, I think that one of the first viral videos that I saw of yours was the one where you were talking about flowers. So you were talking about like doing a complete gift. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, the original video was sort of I think I termed it weaponized ignorance. So, weaponized incompetence is when you know that if you do a bad job, someone else will take it over, right? That's probably an excellent oversimplification of a really complex topic. Weaponized ignorance is like, you don't know, but you have no interest in learning, and you're not going to put any effort into doing any better. And the thing about the video was, for context, the video that I had stitched, it was this older couple, and the guy had bought her flowers from the store, but he just left them on the counter. And so she was the one who had to take these flowers and take them out of the bouquet, cut the stems, get them to the vase, arrange everything. And some folks really do enjoy that process, right? Some folks really do enjoy the process of doing the unpacking and whatnot, but it's not really a gift. Essentially what he did was he bought flowers and that was it. Like he could have taken the extra steps. He is perfectly capable of taking those out of the wrapping, of trimming the stems, of finding the vase, of filling it up with water and whatever that little weird sugar packet is, and having it all set so it's a complete thing. And instead what he gave her was like this task, like this series of tasks that she has to do instead of being able to enjoy this thing. And you see that play out in a lot of ways. One of my favorite go-to examples is like, oh, for Mother's Day, we're going to do breakfast in bed, right? The kids are going to help me make breakfast. We'll do breakfast in bed. And then, the mom will get up and maybe dishes are like her go-to chore in the house. And the kitchen's just a complete mess, right? There's stuff all over the counters and the stove, and there are dishes everywhere. And instead of doing this really nice thing, in your mind, you did a really nice thing, but you've actually given her a ton of extra work instead of also cleaning up after yourself so that she can enjoy the breakfast without there being some weird string attached to it that like, oh, this is nice, but I'm gonna have to do all this work later because, you weren't thoughtful or considerate enough to think about what the impacts on me would be with this. And I have sometimes gotten pushback on that because folks are like, why would you, I don't get gifts at all. Like, why would you make a thing out of this? And I still think it's important to say, like, if you're doing something for your partner, like if you are gonna make lunch reservations for Mother's Day and you have kids, who's watching the kids? Who's finding that person to watch the kids and making those arrangements so that your partner doesn't have to do it? who is, if the kids are going, who's getting the kids ready, who's getting them into the car, who's going to make sure that they have things so that they are entertained at the restaurant when they have to wait longer because it's Mother's Day and college graduation weekend and all that. And it's just all these extra things that have to be thought of, because if you don't do those things, essentially what's happening is all that mental load is going back on the person that you're trying to do something nice to, and they can't enjoy it at all. In fact, you've made the situation worse than if you had just done nothing, which I find to be really kind of interesting. But yeah, that hopefully that's a good overview of like where that original video came from. But
everyone who's listening is like, yes. What's at the, okay, you said there's all of this stuff that you kind of have to notice. What is going on there? What's the disconnect there? Why? I don't know. You get a lot of pushback in your comment section.
I think I know.
What is going on there?
I think the short answer is probably patriarchy, which is a good answer from most of the questions that would probably come up today. But from the male perspective, you've succeeded if you've provided. Right. So I'm sure that the guy, like the older couple, the guy in the older couple in the original video that I stitched about weaponized ignorance with the flowers and whatnot, he probably thought that he did something really special because he provided flowers. Like he went and he bought them and he gave them to her. And that was that. And I think a lot of men look through that perspective of, I made this reservation, I'm paying for lunch, or, we're going to do this trip, I'm going to pay for it, but you end up being the one to plan all of it. And, I've provided, so I've done my task. Like that's what was expected of me. And now I'm done. And very often the rest of that feels like domestic labor that unfairly falls primarily on women's shoulders in cishet relationships. And so you end up in that spot where the women are the ones who are so accustomed and, conditioned over years and years of doing these things to take on all that mental load. And so to them, they see all the pieces very clearly if they've had to do that for years and years and years. Whereas the men who have chosen not to engage with that work don't see it. It's almost like it's invisible, like it doesn't exist, because things just happen. It's like, oh, my laundry is just cleaned and folded and taken care of, and there are just clean dishes for some reason. And, magically there is food in the pantry and the refrigerator. And it's because they're not engaging with those tasks, so they don't understand the minutia of everything that goes into it. One example I would give, I'd done a video about fair play and taking out the trash, because we live in a rural area. So, most folks, trash is as simple as you take it out to the bin, you take the bin to the curb, you bring the bin back. And we live in a rural area, so we actually have to take our trash to a dump location. That makes it sound like a stinky dump. It's not a stinky dump. It's like huge, enormous, industrial, squeezy dumpster type of trash, but still. And taking out the trash is not just me taking the kitchen trash. Like there's a trash can in my office. There's a trash can in our bathroom. We have a diaper genie, which is horrible. We have boxes from Amazon deliveries and things like that, and HelloFresh that we need to tear down. So there's actually all this stuff that needs to go through. And my understanding of what the trash being taken out is different, because my partner and I have had a talk about it to figure out like what are our standards of that specific task. So we've had an explicit conversation about all the individual steps that go into something that seems kind of simple, but is not. And I don't know that a lot of people have had a chance to have that conversation. It's part of the reason I'm a really big fair play advocate. I'm not trained or anything like that. I'm just a really big fan. But that's part of what I'm getting at, I think.
Yeah, I love that. You touch on a really important part, and I want to throw it back to kind of what got you started in all of this content. What made you notice? Like, why do you think you noticed? And like, what's the disconnect here between other people who are not there?
Okay, so I promise I'm not trying to blow smoke or anything like that, but it was your account. You talked a lot about fair play, and I'm always like,
blow more smoke. She needs it. Blow more smoke. She needs to hear that.
But you talked about it a lot, and the more you talked about it, the more I was like, this actually seems really approachable as a system. And I'm always trying to figure out like, how can I be the best version of myself, because unfairly or not, I do define a lot of who I am through the type of partner that I am to Kelly, and the type of father that I am to Eleanor and Adelaide, and my role within our family. And I want to make sure that I'm not leaving her feeling the way that I saw my mom felt when I was younger, or I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit later, but there are also, again, if we're coming back to patriarchy, there are so many things in culture that drive me crazy, because as I was trying to take on this identity of father, there are so many just infantilizing examples of dads out there who are buffoonish and clueless and who are not expected to know these things. And it's like, I want the opposite of that. I want the antithesis of that. Like, I don't want to be the buffoon who doesn't know anything, who's just there to make the kids giggle. And in the meantime, has, you know, a smoking hot partner who does everything and is stressed out all the time because they're doing everything. So that was part of my investment. And you know, I try really hard to make sure that things were balanced, but I looked at Fair Play. I was like, this seems like the way that we can make it work long term. Like, this seems like the way that we can, I don't want to use the word institutionalize, but like formalize those conversations, like make them a core part of the unit that we are, and make that part of like our long-term plan for success in our relationship as like partners and parents. And that was where it sort of evolved into. That's how I got interested in Fair Play to begin with, which, by the way, the audiobook is awesome for like the first 2/3, and then like once it gets to the cards section, I had to switch back over, and I was like, I'm just gonna buy the paper copy because, you know, don't get me wrong, you did a nice job narrating, but once it gets to the cards, it was very confusing.
I'll tell you that when she starts reading the cards, I feel like, Crystal, you and I have talked about this before. This is my white hot tears moment. I was driving home from work with an infant and a toddler. My full-time job, my husband who worked nights and 2 weekends out of the month. I was furious because anybody who's had the audiobook, she reads the mental load and the invisible labor off for these cards. And I had my hands like white knuckle on the steering wheel. And I was just like, what the fuck? All of this is mine. Because you know, it's all invisible.
The amount of times I tell the story to new parents about how, like, especially like moms to be, where I'm like, make sure you don't set your life up so that you're wearing the wireless breast pump while you're driving your kindergartner and your first grader to school with the screaming newborn in the back. Maybe I did too much. Like, maybe I was trying to do too much. So maybe just don't do that. Get a wired breast pump so you have to sit down. But yeah, it's especially like those parts. I feel like every woman that comes across that book is like, I had to stop reading it because I was crying too hard, or I was so enraged I had to throw it. So your content helps me walk through it without having to read the book. But yeah, definitely relatable.
That's a very good transition. So I'm going to show you a video. It's not completely related to what we're talking about, but
it's pretty close.
It's very,
yeah,
it's very interesting what is happening in here. I'm going to share it. Okay. So this is a TikTok video that went very viral. Michael, have you seen it yet?
I have not. No, I don't remember this one.
Okay. I haven't seen it in a while, so we're kind of going in cold. Let's see how it goes.
I feel like I've seen a lot of people post like crying TikToks, and I was like, what would I ever hysterically sob over that wasn't somebody like literally passing away? Like, what little insignificant thing would make me have a meltdown in the kitchen? Do you want to know? Men, if you fucking date people who collect things like specimens and shit, oh my god, and just never throw anything away, because I just came home from vacation and I have this greenhouse window here and it's full of things, but one of the things I display in there, oh my god, is like dried florals and like dried bouquets. I'm sorry, I've been crying for like an hour and a half. But I've had these flowers since like, I don't know, like I had flowers from when my grandfather passed away when I was younger, and I jarred them. And I also had flowers from like when my friend passed away. I just, like, they all were sentimental. They all had like purpose. And some of them, you know, I have bought more recently, like, but those aren't the ones that got thrown away. And I'm a photographer, so I get flowers a lot, and I keep them separate. And then, you know, we've been together for 5 years, he's never ever thrown away flowers. Like, they'll go rotten on the fucking counter, but he thought he was doing something nice and like cleaning the house. But he threw away my entire collection. Oh my god. I feel like so stupid for being so upset, but I just can't stop crying. like dug through the trash and they're just all ruined. Like they're just in there and they're disgusting. And he obviously did this like days ago when I was out of town, and like he didn't ask me because he thought that they were all like trash. But yeah, I'm just really sad. I don't really know how to process this or like why it's making me so inconsolably upset. I just am.
That's sad.
So many
first
things.
reactions.
I'm sad that she tried to like minimize her feelings at the end. Like, I'm silly for being upset. It's like, no, you're not. those are sentimental things. Like, we attach value to objects, not just people and places, but to things as well. And like, clearly there was a very significant emotional attachment there when she's talking about flowers that were from family members' funerals. I think what I was thinking while I was watching this is it leans towards a bigger problem that I see with men who have a more stereotypical patriarchal view of relationships, which is there's a lack of curiosity. There's a lack of curiosity about your partner, about how your house works, about how your life works. And if he had demonstrated even a modicum of curiosity, he would know that these flowers that have been there for 5 years, it wasn't like she left pizza crust out on the counter and he threw it away, which would make sense. Like, those had been sitting there for 5 years of their relationship, and never once did he see those and see them as trash. And just a little bit of curiosity about his partner would have let him know that those have some pretty significant emotional meaning for her, that's really significant emotional value, and that throwing them away would not just be bad but devastating. Like, I don't foresee her recovering from this for a really long time, if ever, because it's not just like the thing, it's the emotion and the memory attached to it, and that's gone. Like, you can't, there's no bringing that back. And that was what I was thinking while I was watching that one. That was a tough watch.
I think that's like, Michael, in your experience, what do you think? Because I love that point about like the traditional kind of understanding under patriarchy of partners, of like men not having curiosity toward their partner. I think that's so specific and something I hadn't thought of until now. What do you think prevents men in particular, like in cishet relationships, from that curiosity? Do you feel like it's one of those things where it's like, if it's not modeled for us, we don't pick up on it? Or do you think it's just not normalized as part of like the provider persona?
If we're going like the bell hooks route, it's just that most men aren't really taught how to love or be loving. And like, that's even something that I still struggle with. And I don't mean that I don't love my partner or my kids, but it's like, they have had so much more experience. My partner in particular, like loving and being loving, than I have as someone who is like societally conditioned out of it. It ends up being this constant struggle to actually show that. I mean, being loving means being curious about your partner, right? And caring about them. And if we're talking about those patriarchal relationships where, yeah, there's that really stereotypical view of men and women from that perspective, then we could go back to that gross statistic about what age do you find to be attractive as you age. And like, for women, it's a slope, and for men, it's a line, and it's really creepy. And I think part of that is like, there's not that extra attachment. Like, I feel like the reason the slope goes up is because as you mature, you're looking for someone who else has matured as well. And you want to have those more mature, deeper level connections from people who truly understand themselves and understand you. And sometimes you don't. Right. But yeah, that's my initial thought on that one, off the cuff.
I guess my follow-up question would be, if you had a message for men whose wives forward them this podcast episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where would you suggest, if they're like, oh, if the men are like, oh my God, I've never thought about that, about like, what does that mean for me to like be curious about my partner? How do I engage in that work? Where would you suggest they start? I mean, I think your channel is a great jumping off point for that, because there's so much of that woven into your content. Where else would you suggest that they start with that on that journey? Since like you didn't have it modeled for you, it's like a process ongoing for you.
I think probably the lowest, most comfortable barrier to entry would probably be The Will to Change by Bell Hooks, because it's an introduction to feminism from a feminist who loves men, and what men can be. And the thing is, if you have been forwarded this podcast and you're a guy listening to this right now, I just want to start by saying, like, I've already been called a beta and a simp and a cuck and like all these other words that ended up on my muted list. Someone called me a bag of milk once. That was the most creative. I was like, I don't have that one on my list yet. So
I didn't have that one tagged.
So sometimes that ends up being like the first response. Like that's essentially what this
Mm.
guy is just simping for women or something like that. And I would encourage the second response to be one of curiosity, where it's like, why did a woman send this to me? Because if there's a man talking about something and a woman thinks that it has value, that you hear it, then there might be a little bit more behind the scenes there, right? And if the first response is usually dismissiveness, I would encourage you to just listen a little bit more and see like what might your partner or whoever sent this to you think was valuable about this message. But yeah, I've been working my way through that book again through like the audiobook in particular, because when you have two kids, you don't get to sit down and read that often. But I do really appreciate the perspectives that came along with that. And there's I think a partnership in the book that she talks about, where it's like you know we're both harmed by patriarchy. Like men and women are both harmed by patriarchy, and the solution is not just like emphasizing one side over another. Like patriarchy is that. And I get that there are a lot of women who are completely frustrated and completely done with men. I think it was Cheska with the speech prof. Sorry, the speech prof. Probably shouldn't just call him by his last name. Who had this really great viral video where he's like, men think they're competing with other men, but really what they're competing with is, would a woman feel like she's better off completely alone?
Yeah,
That's what they're competing with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a really fascinating perspective. So I really like the idea of partnership and community in the book, that it's a bit of a team effort. And I don't want to ramble too much because you're asking really great questions and I don't want to get too far off topic. But I think it comes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, like where do some of those struggles come in? And I still struggle with undoing some of the past conditioning. Like earlier this week, I was looking through just old photos that I had favorited of our kids. Like we have a shared album that's just the two of our kids together. So we have a shared album for one kid, shared album for the other, and then we're photos of and videos of them together. And I put it up on the TV to entertain Eleanor. She was in like a weird energetic like mood, and we needed her to calm down a little bit, so we put it on. And the video that I took of her meeting her sister came on the screen. I have no idea why, but it made me just cry. I was just like completely overwhelmed. And like the whole time, this is the reason I'm telling you this, the whole time I was trying not to. Like I was trying not to cry because I did not want to like let that much out. Like if I had just been completely unrestrained in that moment, it would have been ugly cry sobbing. Like I guarantee you, it was to the point where like Kelly came over and like sat with me and like put an arm around me because she saw that I was like very moved by this moment. I wasn't upset. I was just like overwhelmed. And like I'm still trying to condition myself like don't cry that much. But I also don't want my kids to grow up and see like a dad that doesn't cry, who can't properly express and manage his emotions. So it's like that weird little, I don't know, it's hard to uncondition yourself. On top of that, we have to be the gentle parents, and that sucks too. That's just
real hard.
All this extra work in real time.
Absolutely.
What do you think in the video with this woman is crying and she's trying to excuse it? And like she did a follow-up video and she basically said, well, he didn't know. How was he supposed to know? Which I want to scream when I hear that personally. But what is the cost of not being curious?
I think we saw the outcome in that video. I mean, it's just a bit of emotional devastation. And not only that, she now knows, and again, I don't mean to judge someone else's relationship. I know anytime, I know this happens to you too, where like you'll stitch a video of someone else's relationship. This just happened with the guy who was throwing the lady to the ground like repeatedly.
Yeah.
That video that went around that we like all stitched. And then a bunch of people show up in the comments. They're like, how are you going to judge someone's relationship off of 32 seconds? It's like, I have eyes. They put it on the internet.
They shared it on the internet with trying to be funny. I'm just using it like that.
So yeah, I don't mean to judge, but and I don't want to put any undue pressure on her because she's the victim in all this. What I would say though is like he should have known. Like he absolutely should have known. That was something really important to her. Like how could he not have known? She talked about how she added to that collection over the past couple of years, and if they've been in a relationship for 5 years, that means he's seen her build this collection, like seen her create more memory and more meaning within this thing that has a lot of value to her, and he just never cared enough to make that an important part of his memory, right? So not only has she suffered this really devastating emotional loss, but she now knows that her partner didn't care enough to prevent and protect her from that, right? That he, even if it wasn't deliberate harm, it was still harm, right? And it was still pretty significant harm for her. And I guess my question is he still a safe person? Like, is he still a safe person when she really thinks about it? And what is the toll on that relationship? Because again, I don't know how you really bounce back from that. It wasn't just that she was upset. It was the meaning of why she was upset. And, I know sometimes we talk about, like, it doesn't matter if you didn't mean to step on my toes, like my toes hurt because you stepped on them. And in this case, he like broke the whole foot. And I just don't know. I don't know how you bounce back from that. I really don't. I feel like it's kind of like at this point, like a slow demise, if I had to guess, because it's really hard not just to experience that loss, but to also know that your partner could have prevented it entirely. And I feel like that's really hard to let go of and move on from.
I'll tell you, a lot of women, I'm speaking from experience in work, in family, in friendships, in relationships. If something like that happened to me, I would catch myself 100% being like, I just needed to be more clear up front. That's on me. I wasn't explicit enough on that. If I don't want that to happen again, how am I going to fix it for myself? I'm either going to talk myself into that was an unintentional thing that happened, totally unintentional. So how do I prevent it in the future? I will just, I don't know. I think that a lot of women internalize how that's her fault. She owned it in a minute and a half. She was like, oh
yeah. In a minute and a half, she had turned it around to minimize it. I think also what I see a lot in a lot of client work is that this idea that because women are conditioned by like societally to take on emotional labor and emotional mental load, that it's easier, like, and for me personally, right? It's easier for me to put myself on an island and be like, you know what? I overreacted. This in my way, I just like need to own what I need to own. Because it's too hard for me it feels too hard in that moment for me to have that conversation with my partner in a way that doesn't already feel like I'm going to make it worse. Right. So I think a lot of us internalize it because it's at the end of the day feels easier. Long term, it's not, right? Clearly, because I think what Michael's saying is like that cost is emotional distance, right? The cost of not being curious is emotional distance. And in that situation where only one partner is aware that there's emotional distance, right? Because the other one isn't paying attention to what needs to go into the relationship to be engaged. So it's,
I have no
much
idea
easier.
why she filed for divorce.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
blindsided.
Right. Yeah, I'm totally blindsided. I turned around and one day she was done. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And actually in the Will to Change, I quote this specific thing all of the time because I think it was a really big moment for me. But Bell Hooks talks about dominator culture and how because of that, because of a variety of reasons, men, when challenged or when faced with a mistake, he did it. Maybe he did it on accident because he wasn't curious. Then she now has to caretake herself for being disappointed and upset and devastated. She has to caretake his feelings because he's going to feel challenged and attacked by that. And then she has to caretake herself again when he becomes defensive, and she has to validate herself. Like you said, Crystal, sometimes maybe even if he's not going to react that way, I've had enough experiences with men and women who have absorbed these patriarchal norms and been in places of power above me that I will go, I'm just going to I'm just going to talk myself into that okay. And again, create an island. I'm just going to go ahead and harden my shell real quick. Yeah. It's easier
to do it that way. Yeah, definitely.
It almost feels like an extension of a, weaponized incompetence into an emotional realm. Like you just, I'm going to do the dishes because I know he's not going to load the dishwasher right. And in this case, it's like, I'm not going to engage emotionally because I know that he's not going to engage in a way that's going to be meaningful or productive. So I'm just going to do it myself. Feel like I might be misusing the term a little bit, but it does feel like a bit of an extension over
for sure.
a different realm.
I think for a lot of couples, especially that I've seen working with Fair Play, a lot of it starts with that surface level task. And then the stuff that you're talking about, like the emotional extension, is the undercurrent, right? That's when I go, cool, you've got the Fair Play situation going. Do you still feel like something's off? Excellent. I have this list of couples therapists that I know are very good, have already been vetted. Here, like, go check these out and see if maybe you guys can delve into this, or individually, right, delve into this a little bit more, because you're exactly right. Usually it's that symptom that sets on top.
Yeah, that resentment's really killer in a relationship.
Definitely.
I feel like this one's gonna get sent to a couple of guys.
Which I
How
love.
do
I
I
love
send this
that.
to him without sending it to him? And I was like, just send it to him. Like,
Just send it to him.
yeah,
Just do it.
That's
Don't
how
be
we do it.
embarrassed.
We got your
100%.
back. Crystal, do you have any other questions for Michael now that we got him?
What do you want? Well, like, where can people find you? What can we plug? What can you plug here in this space? We would love for our audience to have access to you.
Yeah, it's world.shaker on TikTok, or you can go to beacons.ai/worldshaker and find links to all my socials. So I'm on TikTok, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube. Might even go to MySpace next. We don't know. It's just trying to cover all the networks.
Friendster,
I've got
hotornot.com.
yes. Oh yeah. I'll start like releasing TikToks over Napster at this point.
Yeah.
Deep cuts for the millennials and zennials and Gen
What
Xers
else?
on the call.
Napster,
LimeWire.
Journal. Yeah.
Oh, LimeWire. Yeah, you can get the TikTok antivirus. That'll be good. But and I'm gonna relaunch my website later this month, probably around the 25th of May, and working on a series for dads to be to talk about that preparation process of transitioning from not a dad into becoming a father, especially leading up to delivery. So that'll be launching on TikTok a little bit later this summer.
I can't wait to send that to my little brother. That's going to be awesome. Just give that to him and prep for life. Awesome.
Amazing.
I'm pretty excited.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming. This is amazing.
Yeah. Thanks so much,
thank you
Michael.
so much for having me. I love this.
All right. Bye, everybody. Oh, like and subscribe and do all the stuff.
Do all the
And
things.
send
Yes,
it to
that too.
send it to the men in your life.
Just send it to him.